Respect survey number 8, and this is one of my favorites. Learn to be wrong on occasion. How many of you are married to somebody who cannot be wrong ever? If your spouses were here, how many of them would say, that's you? Yes. This is actually, there are very few books that I actually recommend. This is one that I'm going to recommend. It's written by a fellow by the name of Dr. Robert Burton. It's called On Being Certain, Believing You're Right Even When You're Not. And his research on this is actually pretty fascinating. What he discovered was that being certain about something is not a position of intellect. It's a position of emotion. In fact, there is, statistically speaking, whenever you just know you're right about something, there is actually zero correlation between how strongly you believe you're right and the possibility that you really are. There's zero correlation between those. In fact, the more certain we are that we're right, what do you think we start to do? We start to create blind spots. Because what happens is, when I know I'm right, somebody may come up to me and give me evidence that I'm wrong. And you know what I do? I invent reasons why that doesn't apply to me in this situation. Well, I know, but that doesn't count here. Why? Because being right is about emotionally being connected to a decision, not about whether it's really right or not. How many of you have ever been in an argument with somebody, and I'll be curious to see who's candid about this one. You've been in an argument with somebody, and you, about halfway through, realized that you were wrong. But you were too far into it to give up, so you kept going. And you just somehow figured out how to end the argument without having to admit that you were wrong. By show of hands, how many of you have done that? We're all human. We're all prone to this. Recognize that as human beings, we are more rationalizing than rational. It is a tremendous sign of disrespect to hammer somebody over our beliefs with something that we're, quote, certain about. It doesn't matter whether it's about work, about politics, about our theology, whatever it is. Recognize that certainty is just an emotion, and the more we can detach ourselves from needing to be right, the more respectful we can become. There are, in fact, 3 ways of thinking that allow us to do this. And that's all they are, just simple ways of kind of measuring our thoughts. Just because I don't understand or agree with something doesn't make it wrong. I may not agree with you or fully understand where you're coming from, but it does not make you wrong. It may just be that we have different life experiences that we're kind of filtering this through right now. Number 2, even if I believe in something very strongly, it doesn't make me right. I've got to acknowledge that to myself. At best, it makes me strong in my convictions. At worst, it makes me stubborn, pig-headed, obstinate, and maybe even dysfunctional to my team, right? Probably the best way to go through life in terms of being respectful, but also being wise, is this. If you give me enough new information, I just might change my mind. Always be willing to hold your own certainties up to the bright light. And if somebody gives you information that challenges it, rather than emotionally defending your current position, simply say, let me think about that. And in the end, both of us benefit. There's a gentleman by the name of Eric Hofer. He's an author, and he had a wonderful quote on this subject that I loved. He said, learners inherit the earth. Learners inherit the earth, while the learned are beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists. Being wrong expands your brain. When you can be wrong, it's a sign of respect, and it's also a sign of learning. Rule number 9, when on occasion you cross the line and you do not bring your best self to bear with other people, be quick and say, I'm sorry. Now, there is a rule to saying I'm sorry. Wherever the transgression happened, and whoever it happened in front of, so must the apology be made. So if I critique someone in private and I treat them disrespectfully in private, I can apologize in private. If I treat them disrespectfully in front of others, it is up to me to make sure that entire group knows that I am extending my apology to the person that I treated disrespectfully. The reason this is so important is because if we create or if we perpetrate an injustice towards somebody, it represents an open cut or a wound in that person. They know it and you know it. But me knowing it, I kind of sweep it under the rug and I hope it'll be forgotten. That other person doesn't forget it. And every time we interact, it's like a small sore that never quite healed, and it's always waiting. And how many of you would admit you're a scorekeeper? How many of you are scorekeepers? When someone treats you poorly, you remember it. Most of us are. Most of us are. Some people, my wife claims, that can forgive easier or just forget. I find that most people tend to be scorekeepers. So whenever you do not act at your best, it's up to you to say, I'm sorry.